Great. Well, thanks to the University of Michigan for inviting us. I have 8 minutes to tell you about all the problems cities have with built environment and adaptation. So with that, a little context. So I'm the environmental coordinator for Ann Arbor. I'm the messenger. I work in the systems planning group. It's about 15 staff that work on it's an integrated systems approach to how we manage our assets at the city. And it was a benefit that came out of the downturn in the economy and us reorganizing. But it has been really one of the best things that's made it easier to integrate climate adaptation into the way we do business at the city. I also want to touch on, I support an environmental commission. It's citizens that make recommendations to council. We also have an energy commission and a planning commission. These are other groups that we work with as we think about how we make better decisions around adaptation at the city. Again, we mentioned the Gleason-Glacy has been a great town-gown partnership for us. We would not be this far along without, and again, I'll point to Dan and the smart people he works with, all the good data, because we need data every single day as we make spending decisions at the city. And that number at the bottom, so we're a small 100,000 person city. That's not the number the university spends. We will spend $675 million on infrastructure investments over the next 5 years. So I need to know today, what's the best information you've got that I can integrate into these planning and spending decisions? So this is what cities do. We take lovely creeks, we make them dirty, put garbage in them, we bury them in an 8x10 culvert, and right now we think we need 3 9x12 culverts to carry the storms coming through Ann Arbor. So we have a choice. Do we do a channel project through downtown, or do we look for alternative ways to fix this? We have really good spatial data, and it turns out a lot of other cities don't. So it's easier for us to plan. And so we have 7 different creek sheds. Allen Creek, the one through the middle of town, is over almost 50% impervious. So half the space that rainwater used to go doesn't have anywhere to go, and now we have to manage it. And you can see most of the other ones at around 30%, and I think if you ask Laura, you get around 8 to 10%, and the creek shed ecology really starts to suffer. So that's a whole nother issue with our creek sheds. So wanted to also put this in scale. These are all the public streets in the city of Ann Arbor. 2.9 square miles of hard surface. Again, the rainwater doesn't have anywhere to go. 10% of the total city area, and so our city streets in that right-of-way represent about 25% of all that surface. Now that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because as a city, we have control over that. I don't have as much control over your private spaces, your backyards, your driveways. So now I'm going to touch a little bit on the key impacts that we're seeing. And again, there's lots, but in terms of, you've heard a lot of the data that we've talked about. So we expect to see increased precipitation. We heard from Dan, it's already up 25%. That goes a long way when we talk to staff and residents that this is what we're measuring already. This isn't what the models are saying. The models are saying it's going to get worse. So we're seeing flooding. We're expecting changes in water treatment. We talked to the plant, and those big deluges of water change the water chemistry and change the way we have to treat water. We are fortunate we do not have combined sewers, so we have a separate stormwater system and sanitary system. But when you get those extreme water events, water tables rise, that water infiltrates into our sanitary pipes, and we have to treat a lot more water at the sanitary system. We know we're seeing more extreme storms. We have 2 dams. Andrew mentioned hydropower in Niagara. Ours are tiny, but still, big storms, that water's going to pass over. We're not going to generate electricity. Small, and the droughts in between, we're going to get less energy than we thought. And that whole cost-benefit model of what to invest in changes. High heat days, lots of public health effects we're looking at, but in terms of the built environment, what kind of streets do we need to be building with a changing climate? We have an extensive urban forest. We're 33% canopied. We have goals to go to 40%. What's this changing climate mean to the existing trees we have? What kind of new pests are all of a sudden going to make it north? And are going to threaten our trees. We know we're 40% maples, so we've had emerald ash borer, but is some maple pest going to come along and go, are we going to lose another chunk of our forest? Do we need to redefine what native species are? We try and plant only native species, but if we know that the climate's changing, do we need to look to the south and say, what's working in southern Ohio? Because maybe that's what we need to be planting now, because those trees are definitely within the time frame of the climate changes that we're predicting. We're taking a look at freeze-thaw cycles. Ice storms are our worst storms, the most damage, most potential for public health problems. And we need an increase in tree maintenance, because if you're not maintaining your trees, those trees tend to fall. Also worried about street failures. We know this winter it was terrible on streets, and an extra $1 million doesn't go anywhere to covering our additional cost to manage potholes. How am I doing? Okay, I think I'm close. Challenges to adaptation, 3 more slides. So the storm data, and this is where it gets really practical, the storm data that we use for regulation. So FEMA draws flood maps. I'm going to show you another slide in a minute. They draw flood maps around a certain storm. It's not the right storm. And it also doesn't include a buffer for climate, the changes we're going to see in the future. We go out to the public and we talk to them and we say, what level of service do you want? How many flooding events are you willing to accept? How many water main breaks? Because there's always going to be a bigger storm. And I can build you a perfect system that'll handle it. It's just going to cost you $500 million. So there's some balance in between, and we need to figure out what those storms are. And if the storms are changing, we need to make sure the public's expectations are different. We don't have a clear funding source for this work. We're fortunate, and I'll talk about our stormwater utility at the end, but there's not a clear way that I can say, oh, we have climate adaptation money. So we have to look and say, how do we build climate adaptation into the water utility, into the wastewater utility, stormwater utility, streets millage, and all of those are funded differently, and sometimes the climate investments we may need to make aren't proportional to the funding that we have available. So here's an example, and pay attention to the third line. So FEMA draws a flood map for our area. The 100-year storm is 4.36 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. Our staff went back and said, where did they get that data? Well, it turns out it's really old. So NOAA updated the data with the most recent. So FEMA should have really been drawing our floodplain maps to a 5.1-inch storm. So we've been underestimating by 17%. We require new developments to hold a 100-year storm, so we've been underestimating how much water they should be holding. So now we're updating the stormwater regs for the county and the city, and we'll be using a new number, but that doesn't include a buffer for climate change. So now we're starting to ask the question, do we need to start regulating to the 500-year storm? So that's why this relationship with the university, and what we need is the best available data you've got when we ask the question, tell us the level of uncertainty, and we'll figure out how to make that decision. But our ability to wait, it's difficult when we're making these kind of investments. So, existing strategies and emerging opportunities. We are fortunate we have a stormwater utility. We use near-infrared flyover data. It tells us what's pervious, what's not. We overlay the parcel map, and we charge residents and businesses based on the amount of hard surface. Well, the nice thing is that now generates $6 million a year. So we have some stable funding to fund our stormwater system and start to think about climate adaptation as we make those capital investments. An interesting thing that we've done is we've looked at the urban forestry system. We've got 50,000 street trees in the city. We lost 10,000 for emerald ash borer. In the old days, that competed with cops and firefighter money. And if you're laying off cops and firefighters, you're not doing tree maintenance. We moved all the urban forestry expenses into the stormwater utility, recognizing them as part of the green infrastructure. So now that has stable funding. We have a forest plan and really can plan for the future with tree pruning cycles. Working with Dan Brown and other folks at the university, we are spending $1 million to develop a stormwater model. And we have had a stormwater model. We're calibrating it. Also building climate adaptation assumptions into our sanitary and wet weather models. And there's a group, again, with Dan and some other U of M faculty, Laura from the Watershed Council, helping review and integrate these water projects. Also have a green streets policy now where we assume that every time we rebuild a street, if there's sandy soils, we're going to let the water go there, and only when those soils are saturated, go into a pipe. I can talk more about this, but I'm probably done, and thank you so much.
A lot of other pieces that make these systems less adaptable. First is that we've converted them. We've drained a lot of our wetlands, which reduces our ability to absorb water.